Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of Rachel's Parenting for Faith, Parenting in a Post-Pandemic World. Wow, what a tongue twister. I pray you got loads out of it yesterday. I'm going to pray again now for us as we launch into our second session, looking at how do we manage kind of failure and how do we walk out of this whole thing of pandemic world that we've been in. So, here we go. Let me pray for you before we start. God, I thank you for the children that we parent, for those that we minister to. And Lord, I really pray right now that you will inspire us, you'll speak to our hearts and help us to be equipped to help children deal with the things that we're going to talk about. Holy Spirit, fill our hearts, fill the rooms that we're in. And may we encounter you as we hear all of this from Rachel. God, thank you for the work that she's and the wisdom she's done into this. Lord, come, I pray. In your name, amen.
Hello, my name is Rachel Turner, and today we are talking about failure and disappointment. It's such a happy, cheery topic to be discussing. I know, but it's so important because when our families are beginning to break out, when they're beginning to re-engage with challenges and try to reestablish their relationships again and explore mission and evangelism and find their purpose and all that stuff, they're going to hit failure and disappointment. And it's so useful for us to be prepped for how we not only handle that emotionally, but how we help them find God in the midst of it all. And so today I'm going to share a little bit of how we can help our kids find their next step in failure and disappointment. All of this is taken from, well, not all of it is taken from it. We're going to apply it to it, but the foundations are found in the Parenting for Faith, Parenting Children for Life of Faith omnibus version. It includes within it Parenting Children for Life of Faith, Parenting Children for Life of Purpose, and Parenting Children for Life of Confidence. And within that Parenting Children for Life of Confidence section of the Parenting for Faith omnibus book is a whole chapter on failure and disappointment. There's also stuff in there about comparison and envy and all sorts of stuff. But we're going to be exploring this topic because I think it's so important if we're going to send our kids out into really doing some challenges. How can we help catch them? Because for me, I think a lot of our children and teenagers are afraid of failure. They're afraid, maybe not necessarily of failing, but they're afraid of the cost. They're afraid of it not happening right. They may be afraid of the self-anger that will come if it's not perfect, or the ridicule from others, or the disappointment that they will experience or others will experience. There's so much in this word failure that it can feel so huge. And so I just want to give us, maybe 7 just little ways in to talk with our children about it. The first way in is really helpful to begin to pivot how our children perceive failure. And that often requires us to sort of step up to it and begin to try to shift the conversation. Because often when our kids fail, we try to make them feel better about it. We try to fix it and be like, no, it's fine. I'm sure nobody noticed, or I'm sure, no, you didn't fail. You succeeded this time. And we find ourselves accidentally pushing aside failure rather than embracing it. And if our kids are going to become comfortable with failure, they've got to begin to see failure as a part of life. Not only a part of life, but like a necessary part of life, a strategic part of life, a natural part of life. We can't learn anything without failure and mistakes. You think about how they learned how to walk, or how they learned to eat, or potty, or anything, write, speak. Anything we've learned requires a horrific amount of failure because that's how you learn. You try it and you make a mistake, and you try it and you make a mistake. And it's that perseverance through that, embracing the ups and downs of learning, that you begin to have something. And often the cost comes on us. I had voice lessons for 12 years, and my dad still will almost every time I see him, somehow work into the conversation / storytelling of him having to listen to the screeching of my first couple of years and how horrifying it was. And I was like practicing and working on the placement and stuff like that, but he was like, oh man, it's so bad. And dealing with the failures that come. But after 12 years, he actually, didn't mind me singing in my house. And that sense of the journey, that our kids forget that they're on a journey of failure, and to begin to twist failure and learning to a whole alternative narrative can be really important. And that may be something that we need to begin to embrace to change the things we're watching and how we deal with it, and how can we begin to embrace that. And I'm going to give you a few tools of how we can begin to paint that alternative view of that. So one of the things that we can do that is a really useful and quick way in to begin to shape how our children see this is to value effort, learning, and progress over perfection. Because what happens sometimes is our kids are like, look what I did. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's perfect. And we use this word perfect a lot. We use perfect to describe things we love. We use perfect to say it's wonderful just as it is. The word perfect can seep in and trickle into our family life. And it can feel like we are praising perfection when you get grades, when you perform your recital really well. What is it that we are building up this praise of success and perfection, when actually a really easy pivot to help our kids begin to value and be comfortable with failure is to value their effort and learning and progress. What would happen if you came in the night before an exam and be like, I so admire how you've been revising and prepping for this. You have shown such perseverance, and regardless of what happens tomorrow, I'm so proud of how you are handling this. What if we began to see, our kid got 2 spelling words correct last week, and now they got 3, and we're like, whoa, you are progressing. And then next week you may get 1 and you're like, that's okay. Sometimes that happens. But you came back 2 again. Well done. What if we began to embrace the journey of progress and to celebrate that progress rather than being like, well, you're closer to the goal, but you still didn't quite get there. That valuing of effort and perseverance and progress. I knew some people who were looking at discipline, and they were working on their child, like not losing it and tipping over tables, and they were sort of going, they just kept hammering on discipline, and this kid, kept losing it, and they began to shift towards praising progress. Yes, this kid may have lost it, but this time nothing was tipped over. Did he scream for 20 minutes? Yes. Was it bad? Yes. But this kid didn't scream, didn't tip anything over. And so they sat down and they were like, oh, how'd it go? They were doing the debrief. And they were like, I saw you. I saw that fire come up inside of you. I saw your brain begin to stop working the way you've described it at me. And yet something in you managed some self-control, and you didn't use your body to express that anger. And I was just in that moment looking at you going, wow, look what you're doing. Look at the self-control that you've been working on is showing. I see it. I'm so proud of you. And in that particular moment, that kid started crying. It was like, it was so hard. And they just had this moment of like, you're doing great, son. And these moments of celebrating progress is so significant in sort of clawing back that feeling buried under your failure. So value effort, learning, and progress. There was another family who the kid was learning how to, I can't remember what he was learning to do. He was learning something. Oh, it was a sports team. It was sports. And he kicked the ball in the wrong direction, and it was bad. And he turned to his mom and yelled, hey, Mom, I'm learning. But that sense of, the kid could have collapsed in complete horror and embarrassment, but instead he was like, nope, learning. So how can we value that? Another thing we can do, completely different, is to celebrate character in the midst of failure. I love that movie, Meet the Robinsons, and there's a moment where they something failed, and they all sort of cheered and said, keep moving forward. And they celebrated the failure because they celebrated the effort to get back up off the floor. What if, as we watch our kids do things that may not end up the way they wanted. We can sit and say, I so admire your peace, or I'm so proud of how you have managed to not let it bury you. You've managed your heart well in this circumstance. Or, I watched you lose this competition, and then I watched you gracefully turn and praise the person next to you. And I was just like, that's my kid. How can we praise the character in the midst of their experiences is really useful to help them go, it's not all about this, did I succeed or fail, but it's about who I am in the midst of this big journey of learning. Another thing that we can do is help making experimentation and patterns of play part of the thing. Sometimes our kids forget that experimenting and making mistakes is okay, and we learn from that. And if that's something that they can't remember, something that they're struggling to conceptualize, add in some experiments. Make bath bombs, and then go, just for fun, I don't know, let's double a part of the recipe. I don't know, do something else. Let's throw something in. Let's try something. And to show what experimentation can do. Some of it will go wrong. Fine. That is so interesting that if you double the bicarbonate of soda, it actually flattens it out. Who knew? I'm learning and just showing them that the mistakes and the things that don't work out, actually you learn from quite a lot. That experimentation can be a really helpful way in too, if you feel like that's another way in that you want. Another thing that's helpful in failure is to help kids clean up their mess. Sometimes what happens when they make a mistake, when they fail, when their behavior, when they should have done something, that they don't know how to get it back, and so they sit with it on them. And I've been a children's pastor and youth pastor and family life pastor for many years in many different contexts. And we keep coming back to this issue of when you make a mistake, when you fail, you can't redeem it. You can't find a way out. It just sits on you and everyone judges you for it. And helping kids learn how to clean up the mess that they made, whether it's from when they stole their sibling's doll to when they really made a mistake with their friends as a teenager, when they made a terrible choice at school or at home. And there's a big mess relationally to clean up, sometimes monetarily. There's a big mess to clean up, but to teach them how to say, okay, well, what are you going to do now? How are you going to set things right? Because you are not your one mistake. You are not your failure in this moment. And there's ways of making amends, and there's ways of cleaning up the mess and restoring relationship. And I'm here to cheer you on for all of that. And I expect that. That's part of the sort of walking out of the mistake, is you got to do this. But I'm here to help you. And if you need any ideas, let me know. But get back to me with your plan of how you're going to do this, so that they know they may fall and there may be consequences that they have to walk through. But there's ways of climbing out of it, because they're not finished yet. This is not the only mistake they're going to make. But they can control how they walk out. And it restores that sense of power to them, that this is not the end. And that is often what happens with kids when they hit failures. They feel collapsed under the this is the end. Another thing that can be really helpful to children when looking at failure is looking at your life. We as parents are perfectly positioned to help disciple our children in this, to not just create an environment around them where mistakes and failures can be learned and nurtured, but actually to see where God is in this. And we can tell them God is with you, God loves you, God doesn't expect you to be perfect. And some of that narrative we can bring in, that sort of biblical teaching of where failure fits in the great journey of God. In the Parenting Children for a Life of Faith omnibus version, in the confidence section, we talk about this whole positioning of I'm not finished yet, that God is daily transforming me to be more like him, and I'm not finished yet. And that embrace of understanding that who I am today is not who I'm going to be tomorrow, and God is faithfully discipling me, and I can partner with who God is shaping me to be. Because you should see me in 20 years from now. I'm going to be so different. And yet so me, because he's helping me become more like him. And that sense of biblical storytelling and positioning is really significant. But so is giving our kids a life to look at who is on that journey of not being finished yet and being okay with that. And unfortunately, that is the people they live with. And that is us. One of the great honors that we have of being in the lives of our children is that we get to say, this is what life with God looks like for me. We create a window into our life, not a full watch everything that's happening between me and God, but every once in a while I'm going to let you see the real authentic what it looks like with God, because they need to know, how do you make a mistake and walk it out with God? And they need those stories, and they need to see that. They need to see that when you make a mistake with them, how do you apologize to your partner, to your friends? How do you apologize to them when you get it wrong? And to sit with them and say, I'm sorry, I let my heart, actually I just have let my heart been existing without God's peace for quite a while, and that has been really hard. And when I don't have God's peace being the prime thing in my heart, then my fear and my annoyance and my fragility and everything sort of comes out, and I snapped at you, and that isn't God's heart, it's not my heart, and I'm really sorry. And I'm just gonna take like 10 minutes with God and just refine my peace, because you didn't take my peace away. I let it go, and I want to go find that. So I'm gonna go listen to some worship tracks and ask God to fill me again, and ask him to show me ways of finding more peace. And I'm sorry that you got the backlash of that. But also, I'd appreciate it if you don't poke my face. Like, you can still, doesn't mean you're all wrong. But to give them a window to go, whoa, is that what happens when your heart goes wrong? Or is that what happens? It's not just about control and annoyance and apologizing for things you did wrong. It's actually about clinging to God and finding a next step. Wow. And so to say, you're struggling with someone, or you're, excited about this thing you're trying, and then it did not work out, and you cried for 10 minutes in the bathroom, and you can come home and tell that story and laugh about how horrible you felt, and then your friends helped you, and they need to see, what does failure look like in the life of a normal person who loves God? Where is God? Where do you go with it? And how normal this kind of learning is. And sometimes it's a delightful learning. Sometimes I'll write something and then throw out a chapter, and we'll have a big celebration of a shredding of a chapter in my life. Woohoo! That was 7 hours of my life I'll never get back, and a terrible chapter that no one should ever see. But you know what? I learned something, and we'll celebrate it, and we'll toast it with juice as we shred it in our family. But what can you do to either bring lightness to it, to bring honesty to it, to say, this is what it looks like for me? And the final thing, I guess, is to deal with the spiral. Sometimes our kids, their personalities are shaped that they value order and perfection and just rightness. And there is something in them that isn't to be destroyed, but is to be discipled. And sometimes that means our kids go into a spiral. I've worked with parents who have said their kid's been doing a coloring, and then all of a sudden, enraged and crying, rips up the paper and throws it away and destroys something beautiful that they were working on because it wasn't quite perfect. And we can feel sort of at a loss. Sometimes they have self-talk that is destructive and begins to, weigh down their hearts. And sometimes it's just really helpful to, in dealing with the spiral, sometimes we want to rush in with 1,000 different reasons why they're wrong. No, you're perfect. No, it was great. Look how wonderful it is. And we try to argue with them that their point of view is wrong. And I find that doesn't necessarily bear fruit in terms of heart change. And so one of the things to help is to understand and to ask questions until you understand without judgment. And so to take it out and say, tell me more about this, because you're the expert in the painting. So tell me more about this, because I want to understand what about it made you decide that this wasn't good enough. And they can point out to it, and you go, oh, and what made you feel like this couldn't be changed or adapted? What was it? What was it? Was it so off? And to understand that, and then to begin to ask, how do you feel when things like that go wrong? And they can say frustrated, angry. And are you angry at yourself because your hand won't do what you want it to do? Or you're angry just because you work so hard on something and it feels like a waste, and that deep disappointment of how tired your heart is when you've worked so hard and you don't see it, or tell me more about it. What do you feel? And to get them talking about it, because you may find that you have a kid who just has such a beautiful brain that their hand can't do what their brain wants to do. And so you go, oh, that is so frustrating. I have so many things I'd like to do, but I can't do yet. But I don't want you to give up. I don't want you to let sadness take over your heart to the point where you give up. You know what I saw the other day? And you can begin to show them the beauty of progress. And there are so many artists who have shown on YouTube and on Facebook and on those places on the internet, their sort of progress of, I started painting and it looks like this, and 4 years later it looks like this, and now it looks like this. And you can see people grow in their skills, whether they're artists, whether they're writers. There's so many people I loved as a writer. My mom used to show me drafts of people's books I loved, and then you could see drafts of like scratching out and changing the name, and like Oompa Loompa, what was a last minute change, it wasn't going to be Oompa Loompa, and just that sense of like, oh wow, they didn't get it right the first time and they learned it. It may be that they need to be sort of validated on the journey of progress. It could be that they are in a shame spiral, and we need to talk about how sometimes we let mistakes and we tell ourselves lies, and it makes our heart feel sad. And God came so that we would never have shame for being ourselves or shame for making mistakes. We can get free from that. And I know how much of that is sitting on your heart. And we can just ask God to sweep it away. Sweep away all those things of those lies we tell ourselves that we should be better, or I messed up and I'm mad at myself, and all of that stuff. God, are things that are making our hearts in a cage and are going to stop us from doing what we want. And you then begin to talk about shame. There is so much that you can do with a spiral, and there's some next steps. All of these, you can help find next steps, whether it's a conversation at the moment or a step aside to say, actually, I think we need to start valuing effort more than perfection. You will find the next step. As parents, this is something that you and God will do, because God is going ahead of you and he is discipling you in failure and disappointment, and he will be faithful to give you words of knowledge, to come alongside you, to show you what's actually in the heart of your kid and help you disciple this. Because if we can do this, if we can give our kids a wonderful foundation of what failure and mistakes and disappointment can look like with God, we've set them up for a lifetime of it, and that is so exciting. So try it, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because it's all part of the learning journey.
Wow, what a great session. And I know for me, I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'm still learning, and I'm sure you are as well. So let's not beat ourselves up as parents, and let's really help our kids in this whole slot of kind of understanding failure and disappointment and making mistakes. So let me pray for you. Maybe think of the 1, 2, 3 things that you have taken up off the back of this session. God, I thank you so much for the things that we are learning, the ways that you're discipling us, and the ways that we make mistakes, and yet we can learn from them. Help us as parents to help our children in that journey as well, so that we can set them up for life. God, thank you. Holy Spirit, come. May we know of your forgiveness and of your love, and may also our children know of your love and of your forgiveness. We look forward to more of you in our homes, in our families, in our households. In your name, amen. So that's session 2, more tomorrow, the final one. And also just a reminder, if you haven't already, I hope you've managed to download the app. It's New Wine Family AR app. It's incredible. It's for all ages, 0 to 11 is what it's aimed at, but honestly, I'm loving it. So I encourage you to download it, get scanning your little picture. The whole thing comes to life on your phone. It's amazing. So crack on into that, and have a great day. And we'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock for our Space Cadets, and 3 o'clock for Stomping Ground. Be so good. See you soon. Bye.